All right, everybody. Welcome to the supervisor training.
Check 1 2, check 1 2.
Through the event we just had, so really appreciate the support. Many familiar faces from the field trip that we did this morning. Appreciate you guys providing that, coming back. Big thank you to our sponsors that helped with that event. By the time we were done freezing and I got onto the warm bus that Chase was sponsoring, I was ready to open it at the Chase Banking account. Cold weather, very much. Really appreciate that. Class helped make sure that we were fed, maybe double fed. So if you're hungry at this point, that's your fault, not ours. But really appreciate you guys being here. Really excited to hear from two great speakers with great knowledge and perspective on training, legalities, how to stay out with Appraiser gel and other gel. Craig's a great presenter, so really excited to hear from him. So we'll turn it over to Craig, and thank you for being here. Craig.
All right, everyone, thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. Absolute pleasure to be here with you all. For those of you in the room who do know me already, you know I have a tendency to wander around a little bit, so I'm not going to go drive the bus up there. I'll be walking around. I like to keep this interactive. I've got some slides. I will make sure we get through the material that I want to cover, but if you've got questions, if you've got concerns, I want you to raise it. We'll cover it in real time so that everybody gets a little something out of this. Speedy, you say yours at the end. So what we're going to talk about a little bit today. Actually, funny Jeff brought this up. It's like ways to stay out of Appraiser jail and other jail. It's almost like he saw my slide deck already, which he hasn't. But we're going to talk about issues that might lead to other jails as well. So not to be too scary here, I'm not going to get all fire and brimstone on you, but we're going to go ahead and talk about things that you need to be aware of as a supervisor or as a trainee. Ben, I know you're doing the stream of all of this right now. Do you know, are there participants or there viewer questions possible from the stream folks as well?
No.
There's not. Okay, so for those of you watching at home, sorry, you're not going to get anything extra out of this one.
We'll hand out your cell phone and email then.
Yeah, please, get my personal cell. That would be preferred. So, but the way we do this again, if you've got questions or anything, please raise them during the course of this. So I have been traveling around for a while addressing appraiser liability issues. It's a good part of my background. I started off as a young puppy lawyer, and again, not to continue picking on one person who's sitting conveniently right up front, but I started off as a board prosecutor in all of this. I was going to be a transactional attorney. That was going to be the career path for me. No interest in being in the courtroom whatsoever. And then 2008 happened. We were doing residential real estate closings, small commercial transactions, that sort of thing in the law firm I was working at the time. In October of 2007, we did 3 closings in that month. That is not a really good way to keep the lights on in a transactional firm. So I needed to go find something else to do. Looked at a couple other law jobs out there, came across an opportunity to go work as a divorce lawyer. You'll notice that I am standing here today, not doing that. Couldn't do that. And then an opportunity opened up at the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. That's the licensing agency for us in the state of Illinois. I started there as a board prosecutor on the Thursday before Bear Stearns collapsed. And for the next 4.5 years, I was drinking from a fire hose on liability and claims issues and license complaints for appraisers, real estate brokers, and we had a salesperson credential at the time. That's all gone away. It's all broker and up in Illinois now. But real estate appraisers, real estate salespersons and brokers, home inspectors, auctioneers. We actually had our own separate licensing schedule at the time for timeshare and land sales folks. I did the only timeshare license trial in the history of the state of Illinois. Let me tell you how fun that was. Great times. But if you guys want a lovely timeshare in Galena, Illinois, they do in fact exist. I had no idea anyone would ever have a timeshare in Illinois. Okay. I was like, whatever, I got it, but like Illinois, come on. All right, apparently it's a real thing. But out of all of that, I started to develop a bench of cases that are directly applicable to appraisers. 4.5 years later, I decided that was enough government work for me, back out into private practice. And so ever since then, I've been on the other side of the aisle, defending licensees before state regulatory agencies, federal regulatory agencies. I will tell you, I've got a whole bunch of cases at HUD right now, but who knows? I don't know if I do or I don't. You don't need to tell me. All right. So that's what we've got going on. And so a lot of what you will see here is refined down from stuff I've seen over the years. It is critically important as either a supervisor or as a trainee. Everyone needs to be aware of what your responsibilities and what your legalities are entering into this relationship. Supervisors, I'm talking directly to you on this one. Nothing hurts the trainee more than a bad supervisor. The trainees that I have had to deal with throughout my career ended up having to come sit with me because they had a bad supervisor. Trainees, it's not all your supervisor's fault. You have to put in the time, the effort to make yourself aware of things so you can figure out if you have a good supervisor or a bad supervisor. And too many people go down the path a really long way before they find out which is which. What we're going to talk about here in some of these slides, this is a very refined presentation today. We're going to talk about a very limited few things. This is not a broad brush thing. This is going to talk about specifically working in appraisal reports and specifically about your certification. Now, how many of you in here are residential appraisers? How many of you are commercial appraisers? How many of you are a blend of those things? Okay, this is primarily focused on the certification of residential mortgage lending assignments. Okay, is that pretty narrow? Sure it is. Is that 85 to 90% of what I see in my day-to-day? Absolutely it is. That's by volume. It's just a math problem at that point. I don't get a ton of commercial complaints. I don't get a ton of litigation complaints. I always get tax appeal and divorce complaints because you're guaranteed someone's not going to like the answer you came up with. But most of the volume that I see comes from residential mortgage lending. And so that's what we're going to look at here. And the important thing is, this is going to come right out of your Fannie and Freddie forms that you'll be using for bank work that's going to go on the secondary market. I know we are right around the corner from the new UAD rollout. In fact, a handful of us in the room right now, we're in the room a month plus, just a little over a month ago in DC, as we got more feedback from the folks at FHFA about what's going on about all of that. And the answer for us at that point was, folks, it's not coming, it's here. We're here now. And then we looked at the software folks in the room and we're like, that's great. And when are we going to start testing this stuff? And they were like, but you have to use it. So we don't know other than it's here and we're supposed to know how to do it. All I'm going to tell you is this stuff you're going to see right now is in the physical forms. This is in the GSE forms. It's not away. This is not coming out of the new UAD stuff. So it's going to stay current and important regardless of what format you're using. All right. So let's dive in. Read and understand what you are signing. One of the common things that we run into is certifying one thing and then doing something else. And trust me, this comes around at the end of all of this. Certification number 9, I apologize, it's smaller on the screen than I intended to be, but that is a straight pull from the GSE form certifications that are pre-populated in. They are there. They are waiting for you. They are always turned on. You need to read them and know what they are in your form. I have reviewed adjustments to the comparable sales that reflect the market's reaction to the differences between the subject property and the comparable sales. And in the particular report I'm referencing here, the appraiser wrote in the narrative form of the addendum, no value was given to solar because there were no recent sales. Sandy, how do you feel about no value was given to solar? There is somewhere in there a depth of analysis that the appraiser needs to perform. You cannot tell me or the state board of your peers or the administrative law judge that is provided and presiding over the hearing that you are now sitting in, that, well, I looked at a few things. I just didn't see any evidence for that, so I can comment that it's just not there. The market doesn't reflect that. Then why is all of that activity going on? If it has no impact at all, then why is the consumer doing it? All right, that was a little bit more esoteric, other than the fact that it's becoming a reality today. Solar, green projects, energy efficiency must have some sort of impact because everybody's talking about it. It's in every listing. People are spending big bucks working on it. Now, it's the old swimming pool adage. If it cost me 20 grand to put that pool in, that's just because it means that my house is worth 20 grand more than what I put the pool, right? This isn't dollar for dollar stuff. But every facet of this that the market cares about, there has to be careful analysis. What does this mean? Can I identify the trend? Can I support this opinion? And can I express it to my reader somehow? Remember, folks, that's the baseline for everything that you're doing here is, am I able to express this to my reader in a manner that is credible to them? Is it worthy of belief? Why should they believe what I'm putting on this page? In this instance, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. The reader did not believe that no value should be given to solar, and thus that got sent into the state regulator. At which point, the state regulator pulled 8 historic sales. They were over 6 months old, but the state investigator pulled 8 sales with data to do a paired analysis against the subject. Because did you know, even if a sale is greater than 6 months old, you could consider it. It just might tell you something. So when this appraiser came in and said, well, there was no available data for me to use. And they started flopping them on the table. This one, and this one, and this one, and this one. It's not a good answer. We see this one a lot. I'm disappointed. I'm going to pick on her because she's not in the room now, and that's why I'm picking on her. Stacy was in back. Stacy Caprioli was in back. Chief Appraiser for one of the AMCs. I talk to chief appraisers all the time. Anybody that does review work, we all hear the same things. Why do you not have any adjustments whatsoever in your grid? Well, I'm not allowed to make them up. So I just don't have any here because I wasn't able to figure it out. I'm not allowed to make them up. That's not the right answer. What that means is that you have not completed the assignment. There's information out there. Or you at least have to tell me what information you went looking for. And I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, and I really didn't find anything. So as a result, there's not enough information. Okay, we're going to get back to that one in just a minute. But you've got to give something. You've got to make the effort of it. Supervisors, you need to be drumming that into your trainees. If it's not on the top third of the first page of Google, it still may be valid. Okay, you might actually have to, I don't know, click on the page 2 of Google and see if you find something. Or my other favorite, what was your data source? And you identify the listing sheet. And what was your data verification? Because you won't know that, right? We have to obtain the data, disclose where we got the data from. And then we have to verify the data. My favorite answer, public record. What are we talking here? And I love it when they're like, well, see, when I'm in my software already and I just click the drop down, it just tells me that that's, oh my goodness. So no, we're not doing anything that just, here's the 10 seconds, I click there, it tells me it's good, we move on. All right, so right there, that's the first facet. Read and understand what you are signing. If you're certifying that you did something and then you're doing something else, there is a discrepancy there and you're going to get called into question. You'll have to answer questions for an investigator. You may get called in to come have a sit-down conversation with your state board, or God forbid you end up having to go in and actually go through a hearing process. Trainees, you can get into this process too, and have to sit there with a blank look on your face while some angry state board prosecutor grills your supervisor, or why did you not teach your trainee how to avoid this problem? Okay, you're both gonna be sitting there in chairs with each other. Supervisors, if you are able to have your trainee sign the left side of the report and you're signing on the right side, you're not gonna be able to avoid sitting in that chair just by going, I mean, they are really the ones that did the appraisal, they signed it. But that doesn't work either. You're both gonna be there. So it's important that everybody is on the same page with this stuff. Supervisors, you have a responsibility to supervise and teach your trainees. Trainees, you have a responsibility to demand that you are being supervised and trained. Okay? Because we're all in this together when it comes down to that. All right, continuing on the theme of certifying one thing and doing reporting another, here's the follow-up to that earlier comment. Here's your certification number 4. This is on the page, pre-populated. It's always in there. What did we just say about that one? We didn't have any data that I could rely on, so I couldn't support any kind of adjustment. But you just told your reader, because it's part of the form that you're signing, I have added comparable market data to develop a reliable sales comparison approach for this appraisal summit. So you told me in the certification you had plenty of data and plenty of information to be able to produce results. So then when you go into your addendum and you write, but I don't really have enough information to figure this out, you have a problem here. Which one is it? And I will tell you, it depends what state you're in as to how big of a problem this is. I don't like to pick on particular states. California will charge this as a fraud claim. You certified that this was true, and then you performed the assignment and you reported it. So if you certified that this was true, and you're also telling me that you know this wasn't true, and you signed it anyway, then what you've done is you signed something that you knew not to be true. Sounds an awful lot like fraud. Okay, they'll do that at the board level in California. Personally, I think that's dialed up a little too hot. That's just one man's take. But that is the reality of it, depending upon what state you're in, how your regulator is situated on this stuff. They have, it's a varying degree of how much scrutiny this is going to catch. You're almost guaranteed that you're buying a one-way ticket to come in and sit down and have a conversation with them. Just how much further does it go with that? How aggressive are they going to be? It's important. All right, so we've already looked at a couple of the comments that are already baked into this report. We've looked at certification number 4. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm relying on. Okay, moving this along. File came up really small. Okay, this is important. This is in your reports as well. This is before the certifications start, but this is pre-populated language that's in there. It says this appraisal report is subject to the following scope of work: intended use, intended user, definition of market value, statement of assumptions and limiting conditions, and certifications. Modifications, additions, or deletions to the intended use, intended user, definition of market value, or assumptions and limiting conditions are not permitted. Okay? That becomes important when we get to certification number 2. All right. I have this, and we'll talk about this for a second because this one is becoming more and more common these days. All right. The number one false certification that I see involves who is performing the inspection of the subject property. This is a great area for trainees to get real world practical experience. Let's get you out there. Let's get you out in the field. Let's get you looking at the subjects. Let's get you looking at the comps. Let's get you into measure. Let's get you to walk through. Let's do all of this. And in some circumstances, in some iterations, you're free to go do that on your own without anybody else's help. And you can actually do this whole thing front to back, alpha to omega of the report. And then your supervisor is going to sign off on the right-hand side. And we're going to talk about, I did this, I did that. And the supervisor is going to go, yep, I participated in all of this, all the development and the analysis, and we're comfortable with the outcomes. And we're going to do all of this. this became a really popular thing in COVID, where it was, let's send somebody out in the field to do something. And then I'll stay back here at the desk and I'll take care of the rest of this analysis and reporting. That bottom snippet that you see there is from an actual report that I got. The appraiser, oops, I forgot to inspect the subject. Totally forgot about that. I sent somebody else to go out and do it. I really thought I did it. It didn't happen. I'm really sorry. So this is an amended report, right? Good. Now we've disclosed what happened. This is an amended report. At the time of the inspection, I was physically unable to inspect the subject because I was recovering from, you don't need to know what their particular ailment was, so I took that part out. In the original report, I made a mistake and did not disclose the significant contribution made by the person that went out into the field to actually go do this, who completed inspection of the property. I completed the rest of the report, choosing cops, adjustments, reconciliation, et cetera. The contribution of so-and-so was only the inspection of the subject property. The signature date will reflect the comments made above to adhere to use code. Okay, great, thanks for, owning up to it. This is what happened, there was a mistake made here, so I've amended the report to reflect that. I still only have one signature on this report. It's the person who didn't go out and do the inspection because they were physically unable to do so. So I still have a problem because certification number 2 for the signer of the report, the appraiser's signature says, I performed a complete visual inspection of the interior and exterior areas of the subject property. I reported the condition of the improvements and factual terms. I reported, identified and reported the physical deficiencies that could affect livability, sound, and structural integrity of the property. And we just talked about how you can't modify that statement. So I don't care what you came back and did in your amended report saying, oopsie put, and that wasn't really what happened here, I'm sorry. We have a problem here. We have a bell that can't be unrung at this point. And worse yet, now we have the name redacted person who also gets to come in and answer for this because they were not disclosed in the original report for having provided significant contribution. And so now it was, oh, goody, there's 2 of you we need to have this conversation. And there's no recovery from this point on this one because that entire report, crumple it up and throw it in the corner. That's a loan repurchase coming right there. They cannot hold that paper. They cannot move that loan in the secondary market because it doesn't meet the lending guidelines. So that's ballgame. That one's going back to the originating lender. Why? Because the GSE who picked this one up, Fannie in particular, on this one looks at it and goes, you didn't actually do the things that you were supposed to do, bank, so you can buy this one back. And then the bank turns around and looks at the appraisers and says, you didn't do what you told us you did. So you can actually buy it for us. And that's when you pick up the phone and you call your insurance company and go, because that's coming back in your direction on that one. And it's landing on both the supervisor and the trainee, because the trainee went out in the field and did this and went, did you not ask any questions about what came further of this? Did you not ever see what the development of this? How are you supervising your trainee? Are you telling them what you're doing and you're not doing? It becomes a really serious problem at that point. In fact, it becomes so serious a problem at that point that we're starting to see people take additional steps. So if you look at that letter there, that is from the United States Department of Justice, coincidentally the Eastern District of the Independent Republic of Texas, where we currently reside. This is from February of 2025. If you get a letter on that letterhead, that is not nearly as cool as getting a note back on stationery from the president congratulating you on your impending marriage. I don't want this one. This was, dear appraiser, Allegations of criminal misconduct by you have been presented to the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Texas for prosecution. Specifically, your conduct relating to the home inspection certifications for federally insured properties suggest violations of, I'm gonna skip you the code there and just skip to the parentheses because they're awesome, wire fraud and FHA and HUD fraud. Yes, that's right, folks. If you do this with a federally backed loan, then they start looking at defrauding the government. And then that comes. This is among other potential violations or inter alia, as we were always fond of saying, prosecution. Pay extra for the Latin code. The punishment, if convicted, may include up to 20 years imprisonment and a $250,000 fine. Remind you, that's 20 years imprisonment for each count. So if you actually did this 25 or 30 appraisals work, that's 25 or 30. They run them concurrently, not consecutively. They're not happening. The second the letter is awesome because it's a cordial in, like that thing that comes like, it's on your wedding. We're not going to be able to attend your reception, but we think it's great and we wish you the best. We would appreciate the opportunity to discuss this case, its prosecution, and your rights and options with your attorney. Well, they didn't even ask yet. They just assumed you have one. If you have a lawyer representing you with respect to this investigation, please provide this letter to that lawyer immediately so they can contact us, correct? Please understand, it's almost like you have the right to remain silent. Please understand you are under no obligation to discuss this case with us and may choose for us to present the evidence to a federal grand jury. You don't have to talk to us. We'll walk down the hall to that grand jury that was a ham sandwich. We'll just walk it in there. We'll have a chat with them. You don't even need to be in the room. We'll just tell them what we think. Okay? It's great. If, however, you would be interested in resolving this case to your advantage, please have your attorney contact us within 2 weeks of receiving this letter. If we have not heard from you by this time, we will assume that you do not wish to discuss the matter, and we may present your case to a federal grand jury. Finally, if you do not have an attorney and cannot afford one, please complete the highlighted areas of the enclosed financial affidavit and return it to me in the envelope. We'll tell you who your lawyer is if you can't pay them. There are multiple versions of this letter floating around in the state of Texas right now. I've got 2 of them on my desk. There's more. HUD has been working directly with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Texas and beginning prosecutions of appraisers who sign on the left side and don't physically inspect the subject themselves. And they've had someone else do it. So, to Jeff's comments right when he was doing the introduction, we'll talk about how you can avoid getting in appraiser jail and other jail. This is that other jail part. This one is the license problem. This one is a much bigger deal. And it's a different kind of law. My job is to get people to the doorstep of this and get them the help that they need. Because this is a whole different field of things, and they are not messing around. This has become a pressing issue within the appraisal space. And frankly, some people see it as a business opportunity. Just think of how many more appraisals we can get out the door. Just think of how much more revenue we can generate. I have a whole flock of people out in the field doing this stuff. Get it back. I'm going to crunch all the numbers at the desk. We'll get all this stuff out the door. Think about the operational efficiency. Yeah, it's a lot more efficient. It's also potentially criminal. This is why I say, supervisors, you have an obligation to train your trainees and develop them the right way, which includes going through, if you're going to be using form reports, if you're going to be using GSE reporting formats, you need to go through and work with your trainee and help them understand every aspect of that form, not just the boxes to fill, but what's the other language that's in there that you can't get rid of and you agreed that you can't modify. And trainees, if you're not getting that kind of supervision, you need to demand that kind of supervision and have someone help you with this. This can be, no chuckles from any of the people who have been doing this for a long time. This can be a very rewarding career. But it is fraught with peril if you don't do it the right way. Now, those of you who have seen me talk before, you've seen me put stuff like this up on the screen before, and there's nothing new under the sun. I do not come here to scare the pants off a little bit. I come here a little bit to scare the pants off. But I just want to make sure that everyone remains cognizant of all of this. For those of you that have not seen me before, it is not all doom and gloom, but it is serious. And you're mostly not the ones that I have to worry about. I already know that. I know that because you're already in this room. The people that need to hear this from me are not coming to this conference. They're not coming to these training sessions. They're not interacting with their peers. They're the ones you have to worry about. Because to me, the most dangerous concept in appraising is that ultimately, whether the work that you have performed is appropriate and credible will be weighed by, is it known and commonly accepted and understood? And is it also otherwise an approach, a method, a process, a technique, a technology that's also utilized by your peers? And that word peers is an extremely dangerous word, because there are all sorts of people out there in the wild doing all sorts of things that you wouldn't think for a second are your peers. But they think you are. It's a two-way street. So, they're doing this. I know, they're doing the exact same thing. You can't indict them. Yes, they can. Yeah, they really can. They'll even put it right for you. They really can. Okay? I've got a situation that's somewhat related to this, where it's also about signing and knowing what you're signing and having control over your signature. How many of you in your offices, assuming that you've got a multi-appraiser office going, obviously there's a different scenario when you are fully solo and doing your own thing. When you've got multiple appraisers in your office, how many of you have active controls on when someone's signature can be applied to a report? I bring that up because it's an important control feature to have in place. In the dawn of everything going out in like a PDF format or some other reporting file electronically, as opposed to back in the bad old days when it was physically print the form out and God forbid you're gluing or stapling photos actually into the pages. That's been a thing, folks, for those of you that are newer to this, but for those of you that got to avoid that, it was solely in computing land. In the early days of digital signatures, oftentimes it was just like, we'll get the digital signature, we'll slap it in the software program, and it just throws it on there and out the door it goes. Too many times in my career, I have had an appraiser sitting in my office, in a conference room at the state board, who says, I never saw, I don't know how my signature got on that. I never saw this version of the report that went out. Because there were no safeguards, there were no controls in place for when the signature could be applied or not. For those of you who are trainees that are able to work on developing the report from top to bottom, you go out, you do the work, and then you come back, and then you're working on your own form, and then you give it to your supervisor, and your supervisor identifies something that they think you could have done better or differently. And so the supervisor hops in there and goes, I'm not really sure about that adjustment here. I don't think we had support for that adjustment the right way. So I went back, I did the recalculations on that again. I think it's actually that the adjustment should have been X instead of Y. And so as a result, that moves our band a little bit. So at the end of it, I actually think our opinion of value at the end of the day comes out as Z instead of X. So I'll just go ahead and take care of that. We'll get it right back to the client. We're good to go. Something goes on with that assignment. It goes into the state board. Board members look at the trainee and go, well, what was your support for that adjustment? The trainee goes, I don't know, that wasn't my adjustment. That conversation just took on a whole new tone. Because now we have to figure out, well, your signature is on this, and we've all been through the certification, so we all agree that you've done all of the development and the reporting of this. So what do you mean that that's not your adjustment? Is there anything else? Well, yeah, that's not the opinion of value I remember putting on this one. Oh, so the numbers changed too. Well, how did that happen? That starts to become a very uncomfortable conversation for the trainee who has no idea what's going on, and for the supervisor that's sitting there going, "You're going to ask me about this." Oh no, they're going to come to me next. Yeah, they are, because that's a thing. Is that the beginning of the question? Yes. First question. All right. Please, if anyone has got them again, real time questions. Bring it.
That's, the new software that are, software packages that are out there. Do these products that are using now, do they have versioning in there to prohibit or at least to document when changes were made? So if that supervisor had a unique ID, that now I'm saying so if that appraiser the supervisor had a unique ID, and he went in and changed those numbers, then the software would say, oh, person supervisor A did this, and would that indemnify the trainee who actually did it, but then the numbers got. You understand the question?
Absolutely, it is a fantastic question. For the folks at home who would not have been able to hear that question, the question on that one was, in today's technology environment, is there built into the tech platforms, is there a methodology, is there tracking, is there metadata more or less to show who actually altered or modified the report at a given time under some sort of a unique ID credential? So person X did this part, person Y came in at this date and time and changed this part and that part. And the answer for you on that one is sometimes. It depends. That's the lawyer answer. I didn't want to do that one. The meter's not on right now. I'm building. When I tell you, that means I'm building. Okay. So this is the way this one works is, yeah, a lot of modern software has every single touch from anyone. It can be the scheduler. It can be a data compiler, because look, there's a lot of places that also work on a team model that have a whole bunch of hands in the kitchen, right? So there are software platforms that actually will stay up to date and do all of that. It has become very advanced. It has become very thoughtful. It is a false sense of security. Okay, I am a Luddite on purpose. I do believe that the single most secure piece of technology that we have in our office is a physical piece of paper that I touch my pen to, because that can't be hacked, everything else can. Okay, I am beyond risk averse. It's we're on a lot of fun parties. It's an occupational hazard. Okay. Yes, there is software that will help do that. There are some software developers here that you can interface with and will be able to tell you chapter and verse, all the bells and whistles all their programs have. I also know that there are people out there today that are supervisors, that are trained people that insist, I have to have a physical copy of my notes on a clipboard out in the field, because I can't imagine you can go out there with a iPad and do it. Okay, so we're with that entire range of circumstances. Those people are not going to have that fancy place. If the technology is not used properly because the supervisor doesn't know how, or it's not invested in, there is a whole wide gamut of ways that this is still done. And it's not, technology is a fantastic tool. And I guess that wasn't really in the deck, but it's an important component of this, because one of the things that you will consistently hear about when you come to conferences like this is all of the latest and greatest technology. And folks, I think anyone that's in the room here who's been doing this a long time will absolutely agree the technology is remarkable. It's a tool. It is not the end solution. It is a tool. It is a tool that can make your life a lot easier. It can make you a better appraiser. It can make your appraisal better, but it is not the end all solution. At the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're complying with USPAC. Historically, we've had this form and that form and these other forms and a couple other forms out there. And the question was always jokingly asked, does anybody know how many of your slaves, how many complies with USPAC? And you'll catch some people throw a hand in the air. There, usually Dignan, right? It's normally Dignan, he's like, absolutely, every time. And then you'll get this next wave, because folks, we're moving into the UAD environment. Okay, first, the bloodletting that's going to happen for the appraisers that insist the only way to go into the field is with the clipboard. I can't possibly take an iPad with me. A lot of them are not going to make the transition out of the new UAD format. Let's just be very clear about that. So there's some field clearing that's coming up ahead of us here. Again, I don't need to be all doom and gloom, but goodness, watch the numbers over the next couple of years. All right. So when we go through that part of things, the UAD reporting format, the portal that you're uploading and typing all your stuff into, how many of you here think that the new UAD format is USPAC compliant? It's the same answer as all of the forms. It's not, it never is. The appraiser complies with USPAC. There is not a single device, a single tool, a single platform that does that job for you. They can all help you get down the road to it, but there is not a single one that checks that box and does it. That's never going to go away, no matter how many great bells and whistles we come up with. And some of those bells and whistles are really great. They really are. I encourage you to take the time to get to know about all of them and figure out which is the best fit for you and what you do. And there is no one size fits all solution for that. The types of assignments you take, the size and scope of your practice, your office is all going to dictate, is this a good platform for me or not? Is this a good tool that we should incorporate or not? There is a world of possibility out there. It has never been easier to perform good appraisals. It's never been harder to make sure that the product you're putting out is good. Because too many people are seduced by those tools. Flashback 5, 8 years now, regression now, double, triple, quadruple, like LMNOP in a loop, regression analysis. We did them all. Ran 85 different versions of that. That's how I came up with that adjustment. I have a simple rule about all of the processes and the tools. If you can't tell me how it works, you can't use it. Okay? They're all great. Somebody took a lot of time. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into developing every single one of these things. But if you don't know how it works, it ain't doing you any good. Because when you're sitting in front of the board, well, how'd you come up with that? How Sparks did. If that's it, if that's the depth of that answer, folks, you're in trouble. Because I will tell you, it's really cool. It does good things. If you don't know what it does or how, don't use it. Pad and paper is great for you, actually. And it still can get you the answer you need. All right? That is another component of this. I come from a generation, so I'm in my mid-40s now, which means that I have been out of the house for a long time, been on my own for a long time. I've actually been in a different time zone from my family for a long time now. That doesn't mean that I am not my mother's textbook, okay? I am, it comes with the territory. Well, I just can't see that email disappeared on me. Someone like my mother is going to be expected very soon to adapt to the new UAD format, okay? A whole lot of someones like my mother are very quickly, very soon going to be expected to adapt to that. It is not optional. This is not like, if you really feel like it. No, this is coming. Supervisors, it is your responsibility to be proficient, to understand this, and to be able to convey it, educate, and train your trainees. Trainees, you need to do the curve test on this one. Sit there, watch what's going on and go, I don't think my supervisor knows how to turn that computer on. All right? That's gonna beg some questions. And you have to be in a position to ask those questions, or you're going to be in the chair next to them. You've trained people. Yes, you've had trainees at this point? No, you just reviewed everything under the sun. You've not actually had any, you've reviewed everything under the sun. You've had trainees. You have sat down with countless appraisers, reviewed their work, helped them, pointed them in different directions. Hey, maybe try this a little better. Hey, maybe reword this. Hey, maybe you should consider taking this class. Hey, maybe you should consider working with this product or this technique. It's rewarding, right? I mean, well, obviously you do it because of the vast amount of revenue generated for sure, right? Yeah, the money pours out of the sky. Yeah, no, that's not how it works. If you're approaching this because you want to see better. You want to see your peers be better. You want to see the generation that comes in be better. Supervisors that are in the room, if that is not why you are coming to this, if you're coming to this because if I get a whole bunch of trainees, I get a max amount of trainees, I can send them all out in the field and they can all be up in the field all day long while I'm just here on my desk, smacking my name on things, getting out the door. Go. Doors over there and there. I don't have time for that in my defense practice. I've got enough other mopes that I'm dealing with on a daily basis. I do not have the bandwidth to get to that. Your peers that are in the room here, they don't need your help at that point. If you are coming at this as a supervisor because you really care about this and you want to see that next generation, you want to see this profession carry forward. Has anybody heard whether or not this profession may or may not be under attack? Has anybody heard anything about that at all lately? Right? There is a lot of fire and brimstone out there. If you want to see everything advance and move past that and carry on, you're coming at this as a supervisor, take it seriously. Do that. You owe that to your trainees. Trainees, if you have a supervisor and you are not getting that vibe off of them, get away. Get to someone else. There's nothing worse for me or for folks who have sat on the state board in their states to have a trainee come in, you start talking to them, you go, what if this happened? What if this happened? What if this happened? You go, they don't know because nobody taught them. And now they're here and they're stuck and they're in a world of hurt because they didn't get supervised. They didn't get trained. They didn't get the support and the development they need. You can't do this. You don't wake up one morning and go, I'm our appraiser, and you're just a fully formed. It's not there. It takes a lot of repetition, a lot of training, and a lot of experience. You are going to get more wrong than you get right when you are starting. You have to have somebody who will work with you through all of that and help you with, hey, this is why this didn't work right and why we want to do it this way instead. And if that person has the mindset of, I'm not going to train my replacement, they're already not here. Don't even worry about that. We heard that for years and years. This is, if you're in it, your heart's in the right place because you want to see this profession move forward and survive. These relationships that you're building by coming to these events, meeting other folks, looking for additional supervisors, looking for additional trainees. This is how this grows and moves forward. And this is how you avoid ending up in one of my slide decks, because you never want to come to a conference and find out that you're the main character, okay? And I have had that happen before. It is really awkward when you're in a room full of people and someone goes stomping out because they just saw themselves on screen because I put them up there. All right, that is an uncomfortable feeling, and we're trying to keep you all away from that. Mo, you have a question, or is it a statement or a question?
In your experience as a former prosecutor and current defense attorney, is it your experience that if a if a trainee and a supervisor come in at the same time regarding a matter on a report, that the supervisor is looked at differently than the trainee.
Yep, again, so for the folks listening at home, and by the way, I'm not saying that as a joke, we are live streaming. So there are actually people at home watching. On a Sunday afternoon in April, I have no idea why, but whatever, okay, you do you, that's fine. So for those folks that are at home observing this, the question was, if a report gets turned into the state regulator and the supervisor and trainee are brought in on that, do the supervisor and trainee receive different treatment from that state regulator? And the answer is most yes. That does not mean that the trainee is unscathed and scot-free. And it is a little bit jurisdictionally dependent. You have a hang 'em high board, you have, let's give them a cupcake and a unicorn sticker and send them on their way. There's everything there in between as far as how the boards approach this. But typically, as a former prosecutor myself, and as somebody who has dealt with state board proceedings, well, this one I think is you can see all of the states that I have done this crap in at this point, okay? Including this fine state of Texas. And oftentimes the process at that point is bringing the supervisor and the trainee in, ask the trainee a couple of questions, and then say, now you stop and watch while we beat your supervisor for a while. And then they start throwing the punches at the supervisor. Yes, supervisors, beware. You're going to be held to a higher standard, as though you were supposed to know more and utilize that and guide and develop it. But trainees, you're going to get to watch the mess of it all too. So just understand you're going to be sitting next to each other when that happens. Yes, sir. That is absolutely correct. That's right. And so again, for the listeners, when the work log for that trainee is submitted and the state regulator audits and says, send me those 3 reports, we'd like to take a look at them. And send the work file for those reports too. And then the investigators roll up their sleeves and start digging through it. They are checking as though it is a fully formed complaint. They are going cover to cover and through the work file to look, does this comply with USPAC? And the supervisor's feet are going to be held to the fire, even though it's the trainee who's looking for the license upgrade at that point and to become certified. If they missed the mark, the supervisor is going to have to answer for why that is. Especially when it comes to methodology and the so that's my favorite subject, which is the work file. And the work file is the part that exposes all the weakness and the deficiency. I love presenting on the work file because I have been the prosecutor that called the appraiser and said, okay, I'm going to need you to send in that report and send your work file. So what was it that you wanted to see in that work file that I'm going to say? No, you're good. Never mind. You've answered my question. You don't. Okay. Fine. Thanks. I'm not here to plug anyone else's stuff, folks. This is not a this is not a paid gig, and I'm getting no referrals from this, and I just genuinely think it helps. In the back of the room right now, Josh Wall is back there. For those of you that know Josh, good. For those of you that don't know Josh, he's good. That man has a hell of a profile. Like, it's good. Yep. So if you get the chance, I encourage, if you really want to polish that up and get good at this and understand what should be in your work file and why, and that's another one of those areas that is fraught with peril. take advantage of the opportunities to take classes, polish that up and train on it. And there are some good ones out there, including there's a provider, right? There's an instructor that does this stuff. There's more. There's a lot of great courses out there that can help you with all of these various facets of that. But the work file is hugely critical, which then leads into the work file control question. You're a trainee and you work on the assignment with your supervisor, and then you move on and you go somewhere else. And now you've turned in that work log, or now a complaint goes in, but you're not there anymore. And the question is, well, we need to get a copy of that work file. You trainee goes, I don't have, they do. How do I get that? And then your curmudgeonly old supervisor goes, well, when you left, you lost the right to have all that stuff. I'm not sending it to you. No, that is not going to work. Because guess what? Some states, not all states, some states will do that work for you. They will go ahead and they will send the subpoena to that supervisor for you. Say, no, you can go ahead and send that work file right in here. By this day, at this address. There is an access issue with that too. You do have to be given access to your old reports and your old work files, even if you are not there anymore. They don't have to give you everything under the sun that you did and then you didn't. You don't get to take the whole library with you when you leave. But if it's your work and your work product and you are going to face liability, or you just need it for purposes of upgrading and advancing, you have to be given access to that. So I'll get that one out of the way right now, because that's always the necessary follow-up question to the work files. But what happens if I'm not there and I don't have it? They wouldn't let me keep my own work file and I don't have it anymore. They need to let you have it. Okay, that's just the way this works. Stephanie, you have a question. Happy birthday, Stephanie.
Oh, that's a fun one.
Yeah, I think Bo was on the state board when I was still a prosecutor, and we had the debt supervisor case where like 2 or 3 different folks could not get back into history again to redo their work logs because they hadn't kept them up to date in real time. And there was no saving that bacon. Like they had to now go back and start another work log and start doing more reports. There were a couple of them like, well, I'll just sign like the supervisor he had done. That raises another question. That didn't go nearly as well as the people that just started over. Yes. That is an evergreen statement at an appraisal conference. All right, folks, I think that's pretty much it for my time. If you have any other questions, I will be around pretty much all week. Please, if you have something, stop by, introduce yourself, say hello. Thank you all very much for your time. It has been a pleasure. All right, well, if you're not all scared to death, I'm not sure that Craig isn't really still a prosecutor just in disguise, masquerading of the defense attorney. TBD on that, Craig, but no, I'm just kidding, but really appreciate the perspective that he brings. Of course, the intention is not to scare everybody to death, maybe just into compliance. I will share, as Mark is getting set up here, I'm in my 9th year serving on our state appraisal board. And so much of what's presented here are things that are the exceptions. They're the problems that can come up. What I found in the vast majority of the cases is that most appraisers that end up before the state board, it's more of a competence and it's more of a training issue. If there's anything Craig talked about, it was just the misfortune of a trainee to not get good supervising and or supervision. We had some for the fraud situations where appraisers knew what they were doing, they were willfully misrepresenting something, and state boards could go hard after those as the prosecutor, the former prosecutor, the recovering prosecutor. That does happen, to be sure, but what I found is the majority of people want to do the right thing. They didn't get great training, and then they realized the lack of training as they're trying to answer a question. Not intending to at all. I one time made a trainee cry in an investigation. I said, "Can you just talk to us about how this GLA adjustment was derived?" And like they were ready to stop the interview, and it was just unfortunate because
I wasn't trying to be mean, I wasn't trying to pick on them, but it was pretty obvious that the supervisor hadn't done exactly what Craig talked about. So the responsibility to learn how to become a professional is on all of us as professionals, whether a trainee or supervisor helping to bring that trainee up. So Craig, very valuable perspective, very much appreciated. Again, let's get a round of applause.
Nobody's ever out there intending to make appraisers, trainees cry. But when Mo was on the state board in Illinois, in the back office on the whiteboard, we kept a cry board tally of all of the people Maureen made cry. She does this thing with her glasses, old male appraisers, old.
I would be in that list of people bowling for sure. Very good. Well, thank you, Craig. Excited to introduce Mr. Barrett, Martin Barrett. He'll give some practical applications and ways that it actually is worth being an appraiser still. Hopefully, leave with on a positive note here. But just a quick note, Craig alluded to this, but Ben and Appraiser eLearning, want to express appreciation to you guys. This is being live streamed and then people can be recorded and accessing via YouTube. We'd really love to have as many live in person here as possible, but we do want this reach to extend beyond just those in this room. So a big thank you for making that happen. So with that, Mark, we'll turn it over to you and
Thank you very much. Is that on or is that just my loud voice? All right. How about that? All right, very good. So for around $400, you too can be in front of a federal grand jury and earn the right to buy back the $300,000 loan. I get the job here, which is an enviable position to talk a little bit about optimism and hope here following Craig. And boy, you know, he sees the worst of the worst cases. I've been doing this for 25 years and seen and been part of a lot of those, managing a lot of appraisers on a national scale. But it is very few and far between. And my general finding is that those that are trying to do good, honest work, not only do they not end up in front of a federal grand jury, but there also is there is leniency in those conversations with state boards if you find yourself in front of them. A lot of times these end up happening where a homeowner is just frustrated with the value that you put together. They think it's different. And so I think it's something like 85 or 90% of those cases that are turned into state boards are simply dismissed after a quick inquiry to the appraiser. So I've been doing this a long time, hundreds of thousands of appraisals that I've been part of, and it certainly is not all roses, but it certainly is a worthwhile career in my mind. So we're going to be talking about a couple things today. The first is kind of successful training and learning. Spending a lot of time talking about the experience portion of becoming an appraiser, both to assist licensed appraisers, certified appraisers that are considering taking on a trainee, and also for those trainees that are here, or prospective trainees looking to get that experience. So we'll be talking a lot about that. We are here in Texas. It is my home state. We will take an early detour here to talk a little bit about what the Texas market is looking like, what's driving the Texas market. These are very interesting times in real estate and appraisal, really around the country, certainly in places like Texas and Florida. We've just seen a lot of extremes in the real estate cycle here. So we'll touch a little bit on that. As we lean into that, you know, I arrived this morning, really just a couple hours ago, and the first group that I was with Bill Street. I had seen his name for probably 7 years. I'm a second generation appraiser. He happened to be really good friends with my dad, who was an appraiser and active online. Brought me in. The last thing in the world I wanted to do was be an appraiser like him, but here I am 25 years later. But coming to these appraisal conferences is great, but I found myself in a circle. And the circle I was in was with Jeff, whose dad brought him into the business. He is sitting there next to his brother, who also brought him into the business. My dad brought me into the business. In that same circle, Bill was there with his daughter, who is co-chairing, I guess, today's events, who is also an appraiser, right? So we are sitting there in a circle of 5 people. I hadn't been here, but, you know, 5 minutes. And it is already a symbol of what you see in the appraisal industry for a long time. It is really hard to get into this space, really hard. I have been training people for a long time, and I have interviewed people trying to get in. I've been the supervisor, one of the few that are willing to bring someone on and try and help them become an appraiser. It's just really hard, and we have been working as stakeholders in the industry volunteers. We've been working very hard to make the industry more accessible to people that aren't family, right, or friends and that sort of thing. I think we've made real progress. A long ways to go. And I don't think the inaccessibility of this career is anything intentional. It's a systemic setup here that we've got, that there's just not a lot of incentive for a supervisor. Craig just laid out, I mean, if any appraiser that was considering bringing in a trainee that just listened to Craig still wants to do it, I think you got something wrong with you, right? And why on earth would you do that? And in fact, I think Ethan's saying, if you're interested in some potential increased income, there's a door, you know, right? So where is the economic incentive to do it, right? So in really good messages from Craig, my goodness, I think it is a necessary reminder that we aren't just putting together a social media post or a corporate memo that just sort of, you know, somebody reads and if it's wildly wrong, you just dismiss it and it goes away. These are federal documents that we are signing and putting our opinion to. So there is meaningful weight, meaningful responsibility with the work that we do. And when you press that against the pressure of serving clients, we go through large cycles. Right now, every appraiser in here is probably begging someone for their next assignment, right? It's really slow right now. But 2 years ago, you were having to beg clients to not call you anymore because so many people were I called 21 people. No one will take this assignment. Please take it, right? And so you have pressures as an appraiser, right? And so I don't think this character that was up here as the example that Craig put together was making very good, honest decisions. But there are good, honest appraisers out there that feel a lot of pressure from the clients that they serve. And when things slow down, what I have observed is this industry has the time to start picking at its own. They start going after folks that were busy and making quick decisions and maybe not as pleased with the decisions or want to stand behind those on the facts. So as we step into this, first I'll apologize for not being as busy up front. Craig is a professional speaker. I'm not, so bear with me as I'm sort of stable up here and stagnant. I'd just like to get an understanding of the room here. First, how many people by show of hands are from Texas and work in Texas? All right, maybe half of us. How many are appraisers? All right, maybe half. How many are trainees? And then how many prospective trainees? All right, next. Okay, very good. So a lot of supervisors. What I see a lot, about half from Texas. A few trainees here, so I'm really excited that you guys didn't leave during Craig's presentation. So we're off to a good start here. We're off to a good start. I also understand, and I think this is the first time this conference has done this. There was a field trip that about 40 trainees went to today, or prospective trainees went to a new construction subdivision. You kind of got a taste of what it is to be out in the field. Were there any here that participated in that? All right, a whole lot of folks. Very good. Well, I think you guys got a glimpse of a new construction neighborhood and whatever stage it was in, and boy, is that driving the Texas market and a lot of markets around the country, and for a lot of different reasons that we'll be talking about here in a little bit. But what great experience. It's so much fun to see, as sad as it is, and one of the systemic reasons that we don't have a lot of new trainees come in and it's hard to get in is, you look back 15, 20 years ago, in trainee, if you had a trainee in your residential shop or firm, you almost were looked at in a derogatory way. Oh, you are trying to milk the system. You are trying to squeeze extra dollars out of it. At one point in time, probably 2010, I was referred to, my father and I's company was referred to as a brotherhood because we had several trainees, right? And that's just one example of where we were. Now we have Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac with presentations made to lenders talking about their risk analysis, showing that a quality of report when a trainee is used is no different than when an appraiser who just does it on their own is there, right? And that's the messages that we should be getting out. In fact, Fannie and Freddie, as part of those presentations, say, hey, we got the ADI here that was part of this. We've been part of that program that are encouraging new people to get in and for those folks to use trainees. But they're going to lenders and saying, hey, we don't have the requirement that a trainee can't go inspect the property on their own or can't participate or sign the report. It's often the lender that chooses to have an overlay, oftentimes from the 1990s, that they've just not updated at all. And so nobody wants to have those conversations hadn't wanted to have those conversations. But now that these GSEs are driving this, we're seeing all sorts of improvement in that direction. So really good. And I think we're making the accessibility of the industry by impact, we're getting there. I have a question. I see none, and I've talked to them a bit, and it's beyond just they want to or not want to. From what I've seen, it's a database problem that their systems don't ingest the reports to see the two different signatures on either side of the report. It's all to say that it's more complicated for them to make that decision. My goodness, do we need? FHAs right now FHA appraisals are much more prominent than they were, say, a couple of years ago, 5 years ago. So there are less assignments out there available that trainees can participate fully in, like they do in convention. So I don't see movement yet. I sure hope we get there. What I have seen, so I haven't even gotten to the introduction myself, but I will. But I have, we started the company that I'm with now here. We have been going out bleeding edge, talking to lenders, saying, please let us use trainees. We can help the process, bring more people in. And we were very successful for 4 years. That initiative is sort of regressed because there's not as many appraisals out there, and they can use the most credentialed people and not need to use trainees. And so they still have maybe an archaic view or have returned to an archaic view that it is a less quality report if a trainee is involved. So we continue to fight the good fight, but fewer jobs out there today as a percentage of every appraisal are available for a trainee to participate fully today than even there were 2 or 3 years ago. When things get busy again, I suspect that's going to change. And I do think that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are making material progress in talking to lenders about this sort of thing. So exciting stuff. So a little bit about me. As I said, a second generation appraiser. I've been at this a quarter century now. Got into it pretty young, helped my dad in high school, just sort of as a means to make some money going to college. Started at Security Consolidated. We are not an appraisal management company. We are specifically an appraisal firm. We are in about 30 markets around the country, and we do mortgage appraisal work. We enjoy working for appraisal management companies, lenders direct, all sorts of whoever needs appraisals, we want to be working with. I think the reason that I'm up here, probably it's not on this, but more than anything, is that it would be weird to count. I don't count, but probably have been involved, either myself directly or the companies that I've created, probably have helped 75 trainees become appraisers in my career. So I've been in this, in the cracks of the world, and I know that Ted Whitmer here in Texas, for those of you that might know him, is one that will say it isn't whatever the fee of the appraisal is, there is more liability to you than the fee of the appraisal. People tell me over and over. So we got to be careful out there for sure. But I have bet my career on helping people get into this, and continue to do that. So good stuff. So that's why I'm here talking about the supervisor training relationship. So I just rolled off the board, National Board of the Appraisal Institute. For any that keep up with that, that is not drama free. But an industry volunteer for sure. As long as I've been in this space, I've been in real estate data and trying to modernizing and trying to find ways to be flexible, and where it isn't possible or it's difficult to use a trainee and bring them in to provide economic incentive to the appraisal being completed, we are trying to be creative to find ways to do that. And there just isn't a lot of allowance for creativity in this space all the way through. So it can be difficult, it can be really difficult. As an aside, last night, this is me, my son's 9-year-old birthday, just like 30 kids. I was a referee for a kickball tournament that he had. My wife got me a referee jersey, thinking that referees are on baseball fields. That isn't how it works, but so and for any of you that were old enough to have frequented in the late 1900s something called a mall, people were saying that I looked like a Foot Locker employee. But you know, I shared this maybe as a symbol of a really good profession. For those of you that are considering getting in it, I think a lot of folks here can corroborate this or talk to you about this after this session. But you know, there's a lot of hard work, and it's an unusual path to become an appraiser. It takes a lot of work, and you've got to be able to operate outside the box. You know, like it's not, hey, do X, you will get Y. It's a lot of research. It's like even finding a supervisor can be really out of the box and difficult to do. So it's a lot of work, but once you get the knowledge to start doing work, the most settled role that an appraiser takes on is kind of a bedroom appraiser, working out of their house. They hang a tile up, which is their appraisal license. And in most normal times, there is more work than you know what to do with if you know what you're doing. And so with that, you can work as much as you want, or you can work as little as you want. It is totally up to you. If you are a stay-at-home mom or dad and just want to do things on the side, there are plenty of people that are doing that. If you want to get into a corporate role with my firm, there are opportunities for that. When Craig showed the Department of Justice letter, in that there are appraisers working for the Department of Justice as the subject matter expert going after that appraiser. And there are also subject matter expert appraisers that are testifying on behalf of the lawyer working for that appraiser in that suit. There are all sorts of things that you can do here. And you know, I think my best suggestion for you is to get curious about this business and what an appraiser is, and follow those curiosities. You got to get the basic knowledge. You got to get the foundational appraisal principles and processes. But man, it's wildly acceptable within this career, a really small space for those that want to go deep into it. And so, you know, this is just I coach my son's 9-year-old baseball team. We're great, and I spend a lot of time doing that. And it's just sort of a symbol of what you can do. Just as an aside, I wanted to mention, I was kind of excited about this morning, but you know, 18 months ago, you know, thousands of miles of driving video was inserted into, it's very off topic, but was inserted into like a neural net database to try and have a robot drive someone somewhere, right, without any intervention. And this morning I drove from my driveway in Cyprus to this hotel, 187 miles. I didn't touch my steering wheel or my gas pedal. It drove me the entire way here. And just an amazing time that we live in right now. And this is happening in appraisal too. And I think it's opportunities for trainees, not in self-driving cars, but in technology, that some of the folks that Craig mentioned might be 1 foot out the door. Because they can't, you know, we got new forms coming in, and we've got the pushing adjustment support on appraisers that sort of somehow figured out how to ignore that direction for a long time. They're going to need help. There's a lot of folks that it's either I'm leaving or I got to find help, and you guys can learn to be that help with not a lot of extra work beyond the coursework that you take. So I am just fascinating. I was amazed that the robot can do that. Okay, so we're going to talk about Texas for just a little bit here. We're going to talk about the market as a whole, but Texas is a really unique market, along with 12 other states, but it is a non-disclosure state. For those of you that work in it or are learning in it, you may have already heard this, but it's a peculiarity here. And non-disclosure state basically means that there is no law in the state of Texas that requires a buyer or seller to report the sale price of a property to the government, right? Whether it's the county assessor or wherever it is. There are only 12 states that don't have that requirement. And this is such a foreign thought to those appraising in the other 38 states around the country. And I've never known any different. In the state of Texas, MLS actually has to be really good because it is the source of truth. And they make their realtors put the sale prices into the databases there. And so it sort of serves as a disclosure one way or another. But if any of you are going to get into the commercial space, it can be a wild west where nobody knows, and you are dialing for sale prices on every sale that you can find, trying to confirm sale prices. And I'll find this when I haven't done it in a while, when I used to do commercial work, specifically in rural areas. You know, there's only 4 or 5 sales in the last 3 years of a 50-unit apartment complex or something. And that really is crazy. We end up skipping a lot of steps in what you'll learn as a residential appraiser, if that's the track that you are, because the data, our peers generally rely that MLS is accurate. You may make phone calls, you've got a good trainee and say, hey, call several of these people. Some would say call all. I don't think it happens very often. It's a secret between you and me. But on the commercial side, boy, it can teach you. The state of Texas in that non-disclosure can really force you to learn and implement use path as it was intended, right? When all of this data wasn't so readily available. So it's a difficulty here, and having a disclosure state can be a bit of a crutch if that's all you learn one way or another. So interesting. So the data sources then, MLS, peer data. So 15, 20 years ago, like Appraisal Institute or ATA type meetings, people would get together and share comps. And that was the purpose for getting together, was sharing these things because they're so difficult. And in the commercial side, CoStar, Crexi, Economy, CompStack, there's a whole lot of options there. But this is how people are dealing with the lack of data. Yes, please.
Very important. This is one advantage we do have in Texas. By the way, contribution here. You carry on conversation. Oh. Oh. No, just leave it out. No. Please take it now. Know that there's hatred from. And I'll give you an idea. When you're calling these people up, before you call, get on the Central Appraisal District website. Look it up. Find out what that property is like. How big is the building? When was it built? Also, in addition to that, just look at the rough. It'll show what the law amount. Now you can call an individual. Say, oh, wait. Here's somebody who's going people like it. Say it, most people do.
The skill. it's skill to learn how to open people up to talk to you. They're busy, they're answering the phone, they don't want to deal with you. Most times you're calling on a sale that's already closed, so they have no real incentive other than a market participant trying to facilitate business happening in real estate. So you've got to approach those phone calls with, you got to be convincing, and bringing some knowledge to the conversation is really helpful. Maybe even to jar their memory, because it's been several months since that thing's happened. Sometimes it's been 3 years since that's happened, and you're trying to jog their memory. It is a tremendous skill set, and you learn so much from calling on every deal, speaking to several agents, just talking about the market. What was your experience with this listing? You might find, what, we had this thing up for 90 days. The seller refused to put it at the price I said. They wanted to list it much higher. We had to wait for 90 days in order to list it where I wanted. I did, it sold. So the days on market was a problem because the seller just wouldn't relent. During COVID, we had super low inventory, and we had 45 buyers for every single sale that was out there. And so you would want to know that they got 12 offers in the first 24 hours of listing this, all over contract. And the reason this one was selected was either because a really nice personal letter was submitted, or it was cash, right? Which is mostly what we would see, is that it was an all cash offer one way or another, right? And so, but learning how to talk to these folks is fantastic. In our company, we have gotten into a habit of sending a questionnaire to the buyer and seller on every sales transaction right away to try and ask some of those questions and understand too what's going on in that process. Thank you for offering that, and please, I would like this to be interactive in the next 40 or so minutes that we have here. Trainees, prospective trainees, if you have questions, if advice comes up from experienced appraisers here to trainees, please raise your hand and we'll go right to you. We'd like this to be a little more informal and casual to go through. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about just Texas market trends generally. This has been really a wild swing for a long time now. The great financial crisis didn't see a ton of highs and lows for the state of Texas, but we're living with a lot of the repercussions in and out of that, namely very low new construction from 2010 to 2020. Early in the decade, there just wasn't financing. All the banks were in all sorts of trouble after 2008 in the subprime. So that started, there's a lot of debate about this. I feel fairly certain that there is a shortage of overall inventory of homes, like just supply of homes nationally. And so this was really built up because we just didn't build any homes from 2010 to 2015. And so right before COVID, hardly anyone can remember this because it feels like it's been a lifetime since all of that happened, but right before COVID, we were finding very few homes for sale, relatively speaking, but first-time home buyers could not compete. It was all cash buyers. The only way there were companies springing up trying to figure out how to get first-time home buyers a cash offer to compete against all these different corporate entities or whatever that was out there competing. So it was a really difficult market heading into COVID from that perspective. We then in early 2020 head into COVID, and from 2019 to 2024, really I guess the beginning of this year, Texas took in 1.22 million people, or 4.2% increase in net of departures, people into the state, right? And a lot of that during COVID, maybe, at least part of it was certainly that we had lighter restrictions on stay at home and that sort of stuff. So a lot of people were coming here, and it was also cheaper cost of living than other places around the country, and work from home was possible. So we took a lot of folks into the state. It also, we have a natural growth that I think it is generally by babies and people being born. I think it represents something like a 12% increase in the state of Texas overall, from 2019 to 2024. But we kind of came into COVID with it already very difficult to find housing, very difficult to find housing. And we take all of these people in. What we were about to do to national or to statewide inventory is basically put no properties on the market at all. So the net migration into the state starts to create a lot of unusual things. So you can see, I'm not going to try and work a laser even if it's on here, but you can see the for sale inventory on your left. That we dipped in 2022 is kind of at the worst of COVID. And that inventory sunk to huge lows. And we are now, over the course of a 2-year period, we are at the highest supply of new listing for sale inventory in the last 10 years. We got a lot of properties on the market. And when that was at the lows, what happens to property price when you have tons of buyers and nobody wants to sell it? Up. And because interest rates were so low, there was nothing stopping anyone from keeping going higher. Cities like Austin, well, the city like Austin, was an extreme of this, an extreme that would match Idaho, Montana, Tampa, Miami, some places that really went wild with this. Austin was a hallmark for that, is all these tech companies were leaving restrictive states that weren't allowing companies to do their jobs and moving over here. So there's a lot of influence, bidding properties up. Generally speaking, prices have stabilized. They've softened a bit, and we'll look at that a little bit in a second. But a place like Austin has really seen a drop in balance, right? Because there was extremism, I think, that was happening in home values there. And so we are sitting now, in Texas and Florida are kind of in a similar boat here, where housing inventory is hugely high and it is slowly moving. It's not super drastic yet, but it is slowly moving to a buyer's market where it has been a seller's market for a long time. And in a seller's market, buyer says, I want you to make these repairs before I sell. Seller's like, I got 12 other people. Do you want this house or not? It's like they're not listening or entertaining any of that sort of negotiation. So things are changing there, but you can see that Texas has an inventory for sale change of about 26% from March of last year to March of this year. Quite a bit. You can see real on the west side of the country, you can see 57% increases, and Florida and the southeast of the US is seeing a big increase as well. Interestingly to me, and I don't do a lot of work in the Northeast, but it is a much more, it's remaining a seller's market and kind of has all the way through for whatever reasons. So, any questions or thoughts there as we're on this slide? All right. So you guys went out to a Pulte subdivision, I believe, today. Where we are now with inventories rising, well, I think first where we got to, we had 1.2 million people come in. We have no homes for sale in 2022. But not only that, the few homes that are for sale now have to deal with, instead of interest rates at 3%, interest rates are at 7% overnight. And the only houses you can buy, instead of the median 325,000 or whatever it is, 450, 500, 600,000. So they're high-end homes, but prices have gone up so much. So publicly traded builders that have a lot of ability to scale looked at that market and said, there are oodles of people that are wanting to buy homes that are driven out by high interest rates and driven out by the price of homes being so high. So we have had folks like Pulte you saw today, like Lennar, Taylor Morrison, and KB Homes, and on and on and on, DR Horton. They went on overdrive. They had the capital markets to go borrow and build the houses, buy the supplies, even if it was inflated. The home prices were up, so it could support building materials that were more costly and to bring in. And so there were tons of these folks that had nowhere else to go except a new construction property that was a little more cheaply prepared than it was before. But it was affordable. The monthly price would work out. And so we have Lennar here. We don't have the data for, goodness, what is that? A little too small for your area. I think that's 2021-ish. But when we get into 2022, you see that 1.5%. That was the average percentage of the sale price that was a concession offered to the buyer. So they were really killing it, right? They start building these homes. There's nowhere else anybody can go. They're used to buying these, and they don't have to buy down rates one way or another, and they can sell them at these really high prices. They're killing it. Well, when we look to the beginning of 2025 in the red, 13.9% of the purchase price for Lennar now is a concession offered to the buyer. Crazy, right? So, and I have a quote here from the CEO, from Ryan Marshall, and this is July of 2023, so like 18 months ago, saying they simply redistributed incentives that we've historically provided. We've taken those dollars that were applied to better cabinets, better flooring, better tile, better whatever, and we are applying it towards the interest rate incentive. So they are buying down the rate. So they might spend $35,000 to buy down a rate instead of cutting the price. And what that does for the buyer is it lowers their monthly payment by $700 or whatever, and gets them to an amount that they can pay. Because that's really the analysis that buyer's, I'm trying to figure out how to get into this house, and there aren't any other options. So buying down the rate basically means sitting out there for 6.5% or 7%. I'm going to get you a 5% rate, but you're going to pay these high appreciated prices, and we're going to get the deal done now. To get the rate, or to get the monthly payment down by the same $700 by reducing the sale price, they would need, he says this or alludes this, and I didn't quote it here, but they would have to lower the sale price by some $75,000 to get the same $700 of monthly savings on payment. So they're not dumb, they make the quick analysis here, and the market generally with these appreciated prices has supported this, and we could get into a long discussion about what the right thing for the appraiser is to do in these situations. It's complicated and sort of outside the scope of this conversation. But this is the sort of stuff that's happening here. But this was 18 months ago. Now, in addition to the rate buy downs, they are now lowering the prices by $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. So if you look in Houston, the market that I personally operate in and see, there's about 7 spots in and around the suburbs of the city. You know, Houston is the land of sprawl, right? And just outward growth, unlimited. And so Lennar and Pulte and KB and all these guys, you will see in MLS, they have just built like crazy and they have not stopped. Even as they're starting to have to provide incentives on both sides, both the interest rate buy down and the sale price, they're building right into it, thinking that the slowdown in purchases is only temporary. So there are subdivisions in Houston, and I'm interested to see how many completed sale or homes you might have seen out there that are on sale. I'll ask for the appraisers to might go on in a second. But in Houston, you will see 400 or 500 properties in MLS listed for sale. Most of them are completed or near completed, waiting for a buyer. And so as that inventory is sitting out there, there's like 6 or 7 subdivisions that have this same sort of phenomenon going on. And so this is why they are lowering it. And other CEOs on earnings calls for these builders will say, we're trying to find the market, especially as inventory is rising. It's not just new construction inventory that's rising. It's also, established existing homes that are starting to hit the market now. And so we're having to compete. The new construction are now having to compete with some lower end homes or same price range homes that are on the market. And they're having a little bit of a hard time doing it.
We went to a Pulte neighborhood, and for as long as since Pulte bought Centex 15 years ago at least, their corporate policy has to not build spec homes. So they've really, I mean, having a whole bunch of spec homes on the ground when the market turns is a really good way to get into financial trouble. So since 2008, that's been their policy, but it doesn't mean they don't have them. It's just, sometimes sales fall through.
Well, and Bill, so those that aren't practicing that conservative policy, we see you get a 1004 order and you get a 1007 coming with that. Well, the homeowner or the buyer is planning to rent it, and so they need to know what it can rent for, because an occupant wasn't there to buy the property. Or we see a whole lot of build to rent. They're building entire new construction subdivisions that are basically apartments, but single family residences in a community.
We've seen Lennar sell out an entire neighborhood to a investor as rental properties. They had even homes, they had 2 or 3 homes that were moved in, and they went and bought the homes back.
Yeah. wild. And so we saw in, oh goodness, I can't remember the name of the builder now, you know, it was the great financial crisis. I think they were building these and didn't know, they couldn't sell them and had to figure out something. And so, you know, it was the first experiment, and hey, we were able to sell to a portfolio builder that would just rent all of these. That's a business now. Let's move into this. It's a big business now. We do a lot of work in. All right, so I'll move it along here. So urban versus rural markets in Texas, generally speaking. So on our way to 5 or 6 months of inventory in urban markets, according to National Association of Realtors, builders are still building. Starts are up. As I said, they've got all these out there. They're not stopping. Whether they're addicted to the building and all of that that's coming with it or not, I think they do generally think interest rates come down or whatever happens, these things are going to get gobbled up, and they have the infrastructure in place to build, so they're doing it. Price appreciation in urban markets still roughly 3 to 4%, which kind of keeps up with normal inflation, although what is normal these days, but so that's happening. And it's a seller's market loosening and moving towards a slight buyer's market. In rural, however, Texas A&M Real Estate Center, 3 to 4 months of inventory, much leaner in terms of properties for sale. Price appreciation in the 6 to 7%. Seller's market, strong demand out there, and we'll talk about the practicum as an experience pathway here in a second, and the need for appraisers in rural settings. In a lot of places around the country, there are not appraisers in rural settings. And in fact, the practicum in Mississippi that Melissa Bond put together, there is literally 0 appraisers in some counties in the state of Mississippi, and the VA had to fix that, and they had to get appraisals done for veterans that were looking to buy homes, and nobody wanted to do this. So they had to build it out. So that's an interesting opportunity to get a start once you get your license, get in. Okay, so talked too long. Jeff assured me I do this. So supervisor trainee relationship. So we have the traditional experience, we have the career and practicum alternatives, and we have kind of pros and cons of each that we'll run through here. First, another kind of nuance about the state of Texas, and I applaud this. I'm sure this might make a number of people uncomfortable, but Texas allows up to 5 trainees under a supervisor. I don't think a lot of states allow this. I probably have had this maybe for a 6-month period at some point in the last 10 years. Not something I've done very much, but it's kind of cool that they do it. And as I was talking to you, I think Craig Capello would probably say this is not very cool. Don't take one on if you don't have good reason. But we need new people in. There are going to be a lot of people leaving this industry, and those folks. You can see the first requirement on this bullet point here from the state of Texas is that the sponsors submit a detailed supervisor training plan. They even have a template for you to kind of guide you through this if you want to do that. But you are choosing to be more involved with the state of Texas if you are going to take on trainees beyond the typical allowance of 3. So I say kudos to the state for encouraging trainees to have pathways to get in. Because we are in need of flexibility all over the place. Korea, that we'll talk about in a second, is a really important flexibility added. The practicum is that too, although I don't think it's set up for the scale yet that something like Korea and the traditional pathways are. But so good on the state of Texas for doing that. So the traditional experience, the trainee can offer a lot to the supervisor. I don't suggest that you go to the supervisor in a way that says, I can teach you, because that usually doesn't work real well for somebody that's got 30 years of experience and that sort of thing. But and we'll talk about this, but you can offer a lot to supervisors. And as Craig talked a lot about, the responsibility for successful training between a supervisor and a trainee rests on both, right? The trainee has to be a present observer on what's happening and be aware of what they are supposed to be learning one way or another, and make assessments whether or not you're being trained properly or not. And you're probably not, I mean, you can have conversations with your supervisor, you should, on how best to get there or what you feel may be missing. But it's also possible that that may not be the supervisor for you. So you have to be actively aware of what's going on there and take an active role in your training. So the hard truth that I think is really important for the prospective trainees in this room to understand is that there is a reason why supervisors don't often take on trainees. We've got 3 of them here. The first is that they lack economic incentive. Well, I mean, boy, I do a lot of things out of the goodness of my heart, but spend 18 months with someone teaching them everything to know about my trade so they can go do it on their own isn't always I mean, that doesn't sound great, right? I'm training my competition and, all sorts of things. Not only that, we're going to talk about this. When you submit your training log to the state, you are opening an investigation into you as the trainer and the work that you are doing. They're reviewing that assignment and the experience that the trainee has got to make sure that they have the proper experience to become an appraiser. So a lot of times states will use this as a way to go have some friendly conversations with appraisers, saying, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? This isn't right. Where is your work file? And that sort of thing. So you got to be really careful there. So there is disincentive. But when lenders have these overlays on what a trainee is allowed to do, trainee can't do much anymore. On the commercial side of the world, these overlays don't exist at all. And a trainee from day one, with the responsibility and assessment of the supervisor, can decide when that trainee can participate in that process, and they go do that, right? Whatever that is not how it works on the residential side at all, unfortunately. So there's a lot of times where I can't use a trainee very effectively in an assignment. In fact, the majority of assignments, I can't use a trainee effectively or to the full extent of participation in the program. It's a real travesty, and I think we've made a lot of progress. We talked about that at the beginning of me being up here. But just know that the supervisor is faced with that reality. They know that that is possible. Okay. Concerned about training the competition. I jumped ahead there and talked about that. You all can understand that. In fact, I think you can assure trainee, or you can assure supervisors that, hey, look, let's talk up front about what it's okay for me to do and not okay to do. Work out arrangements if I'm going to work with the client that you introduced me to after I'm off on my own. Those sorts of things are put in place in wonderful ways to deal with the training of competition. This is, I mean, generally speaking, it's a fixed pie, but with those that you know, it is not a fixed pie of work that's out there, right? There is plenty of work for all good appraisers out there to get in almost every time, and we are about to hit another time in a good cycle for the next 5+ years, where there is going to be ample volume if you have an appraisal license. So I don't think people should be too concerned about it. I've trained 75 in my competition or whatever the number is, and I'm doing okay. But that risk as a sole practitioner is there. We talked about that for a lot of different reasons. It can also be a little intimidating to be teaching someone and you've done it for 25 years, or you only have to have a license certification for 3 years to be allowed by the state of Texas to sponsor someone. So whether you're doing it 3, 25, or 40 years, somebody says, hey, why do you put gutters, aluminum, whatever, right in this field? Or why do you make this adjustment? And when somebody asks you that, if you haven't thought about this, it can be kind of intimidating and show like maybe it's like readily apparent to you that I don't know why I do that actually. And that can happen a lot. I mean, there's thousands of fields in an appraisal. So there are a surprising amount of times where this sort of thing can come up. I've been doing it for 20 years and I haven't really thought about it. Now you're asking. But when you confront that reality, that when people are asking you, you get better as a trainer, right? And as a supervisor, it has made me so much better. I have an explanation or reason for why I do everything at this point. And I've built a company on that. Like I've got an answer for it all because I know appraisers are going to ask me. It's not trainees, it's appraisers. Why are you doing it this way? Why are you doing it this way? And it's like, well, here are my 3 or 4 options. This is why I'm doing it this way for whatever reason. All right. So, trainee, what can you bring to a supervisor that's not just great appraisal? right? There's a lot of different things, office management. Most appraisers are sole practitioners working out of their house or a single office. Office management can be a real bear, and you can do this in addition to taking on appraisal assignments or functions within that. Technology integrations, we spent a lot of time on that. You guys that went out to the subdivision today, you're watching the iPad and using it to measure. You may be using a laser. You know, I keep thinking about the Sopranos appraiser that says, you know, get beat up by Tony Soprano, and I'm only the appraiser, and he's got the wheel and the clipboard. My appraisers don't have a wheel and clipboard. No offense to any of the do, but a lot of them are uncomfortable with that, and there are adjustment support tools. There are measurement tools, all sorts of things that are out there that you can bring to a supervisor. You could be the buyer of that firm down the road if you want to hang out with them for a long time. Most appraisers are just going to turn the light switch off and they're done, right? What else are you going to do? And not hugely transferable unless you are working directly with someone introducing. So you could be that landing spot to buy the firm over long monthly payments that are really modest. That appraiser actually can get something for his hard work, her hard work for decades. Geographical expansion. Maybe they don't cover a county on the outskirts of town that you live in or are familiar with. You can bring that. Online marketing, social media, SEO, website, that happens to be areas of interest for you. Market research analysis, some of those tools, the tech tools that are out here, learning how to use those and being able to bring those into someone's practice could be really beneficial. And product diversification. There's a lot of new products out there. Property condition reports, hybrids. Those are cuss words to most appraisers. It doesn't need to be cuss words to most appraisers, but it also just may not make economic sense for them to be taking those in, but with a trainee there, they might be able to do that. So if you want to scan this QR code, that's kind of a list there of some topics that you in discussion points that you could bring in with a trainee or a supervisor. And it's kind of those things that we just listed out of, hey, here's some things, whatever's unique to you. You know, you don't need to go learn something you're totally unfamiliar with, but if you have some natural, most of these times is a second career for folks. Yeah, I did a little bit of this. Someone mentioned they were in tech before, so some of that just may be natural to them to bring in. So hopefully the QR code is working. So traditional pathway, been around forever. It's got us where it's got us. We are either the first or second least diverse industry in the country. I think farmers or something is like maybe the one competing with us. We're making real progress on that, I think, and I'm proud of that on a lot of fronts. We've got to make the industry more successful. So Korea is not some digestive disease. It is a new pathway to getting the experience to become an appraiser. I've been very involved in this I've been very involved in this through the Appraisal Institute and through our work in bringing trainees into the business and just seeing a real need for this. Given, you know, I mean, there was a time in 2015, 2016 where I didn't want to interview a trainee unless they were able to tell me they'd been looking for a supervisor for 12 months. Because they knew the sacrifice that others were willing to bring in and what unique thing I was offering. I don't like that, I don't like telling that story. I'm not proud of it. But that is just the world that we were operating. There were no supervisors. There have been none. That's a problem. That's not where we need to be. And us appraisers have been the gatekeepers of that. And a bad supervisor is a bad trainee and future trainee. And so, our future appraiser. And so Korea is here, not without its own faults and weaknesses, but it is here to provide an alternate pathway and will keep getting better over time. So, as far as I know, Sandy, is this still true that the Appraisal Institute Korea is the only one on the market? All right. Many are trying or coming, I think. It's hard. I'm really proud of the Appraisal Institute for getting across the finish line some 12 months ago. Others are trying to get there, and I'm sure that they will, and I'm sure that it will be great. But I do know of a lot that have stopped. It's hard. It's brand new. Nobody has put something together like this. And what it is, it stands for Practical Applications of Real Estate Appraisal. And it is taking the traditional experience and putting it into a curriculum. So roughly 10 to 12 months, if you're great at getting through online curriculum, probably could do it in 6 or 7 months. If you're really slow at it, maybe it takes longer than that. But when you come out, you have the experience with no supervisor other than the ones the Appraisal Institute's Korea program provides you. You have your experience that most states, and you need to check states before you get into this, but I think not all of them approve. Is that true? 39, all right. You can even, and some that don't approve it, say, go get the license in the state that approves it, and then get reciprocal license in the state that doesn't. They suggest doing that at this point. But you, in that time, you will come out with the experience. You just got to go take the test at that point, and you have a license in hand. So adopted by those states, check the Appraisal Foundation website, Appraisal Institute website. The cost roughly about $8,000, roughly. A little bit more if you are not an Appraisal Institute member for a pretty. What's that? So licensed residential, $8,000 will get you the licensed residential, assuming you pass the test. Then there is a second $8,000 to do that. And expensive, sure, but what is the annuity of a career and a license? I think worth a lot. I think that this is very valuable to folks. There are tons of scholarship out there from the Appraisal Institute, the Appraisal Foundation, ADI, on and on. So those that qualify, there is money for this if you want to go this direction. The pros of it: no need to find a supervisor. Experience will provide proficiency in producing USPAP compliant reports. You're not subject to the supervisor variability of workload and of training quality, right? So Appraiser in COVID may have really wanted to work with you because they had tons of work, didn't know what to do with it. Now they got none. They don't have any room. You're a stress to them, right? So they got to move on. Cons: you won't come out with live appraisal experience. You're going to need to get that once you got it. That's, I think, a cautious thing. I was going to use the word dangerous, but a cautious thing that you have a license in hand, but may not have done a live file yet. You should be finding an appraiser at that point and trying to work with them to get the first files out the door and learn the ins and outs of that piece. You know, in the live situation, you certainly learn scheduling, fee collection, agent and homeowner interaction. We just talked about the surveying of agents and business development and that sort of stuff. So there's pros and cons with each. And I love the hybrid approach. And I think as more folks learn about this, that it's expensive and hard for an appraiser to train someone from the very beginning. It's like, in the beginning, there was the subject address on page 1 at the top, right? Oh my goodness. It's like, you just feel like you never get there. Well, I would gladly pay $8,000 for them to go get that done first, come to me with the license in hand. Now, those overlays that are pesky from the lenders are not a problem anymore. I can start using you in a variety of different offerings, and you have the basics. In fact, you probably will have a better education on the principles, the academic principles of this than I remember, having had taken all of that 25 years ago. And so I think it's a wonderful way for appraisers to get into this. Going to speed through practical offerings. So I don't think this is in Texas. Anybody know that? Will be coming soon. Okay, great. Started in Mississippi. Others are replicating. Even Melissa, I think, is expanding. This is working with an instructor, hands-on, in classroom, out at properties over a long period of time. But that instructor can work with a lot of people at once and help them all get certified. And that is through a practicum and sort of a curriculum that everyone's going through together. So we are increasing those pathways one way or another. If you're interested in Korea or real estate generally, Jeff Morley introduced me, is my co-host on the Market Moves podcast. We have about 45 episodes. We do it roughly weekly. If you can imagine, somehow we thought it was a good idea for the first 10 episodes to do solely on Korea. So we have 10 episodes on Korea on Market Moves podcast. On Thursday, we'll be recording interviews with 2 recent Korea graduates. Also one that has been on his own after graduating for a long time. That will come out next week. So please, if you're interested in Korea and real estate generally, a lot to check out there. I don't think we have a lot of time for questions, Jeff. Any questions or thoughts? In the back. Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm speeding through because I didn't leave myself enough time. So in the traditional path, a supervisor and a trainee get together and they spend 12 to 18 months or longer if it doesn't go quickly, working hand in hand, teaching the trainee how to do an appraisal start to finish. And that is really, it's a heavy lift for the appraiser that's also trying to get their own work done, doesn't have any system to train somebody, so they're kind of winging it. They're a little nervous about some of the things and just don't know how to train somebody good if they haven't done it before. So the hybrid model, it would be go get the licensed residential through Korea, through the online, pay the $8,000. But in the right scenarios, I can tell you that my company, we could work out something and say, I'll cover that 8,000, provided you get it done and come back and work for me. And so they'll get a lot of that heavy lifting done. The Appraisal Institute of Korea or whoever it is will get a lot of that heavy lifting education done. And I'll have somebody come in that's already on the, you know, the 50-yard line, ready to score the touchdown. Does that make sense? Anything else? All right, back to you, Jim.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that. Again, a big thank you to Craig. Thank you for those that have been here. Neither Mark nor Craig are paid to be here. We wanted to provide value to those that are supervisors looking for guidance, trainees, aspiring trainees, looking for ways to get in, wanting some perspective on what is this profession, how can we get in and make it a reality for us, you know, is it really of interest to me. So Mark, a big thank you for taking the time. One quick thing that was noted to me as we wrap this up, Craig Capella referenced the work file, the importance of that, gave Josh Wallen a shout out. There is a class, a work file class coming up this week with Appraiser eLearning. There's a discount on Josh's class for appraisal work file. The discount code is, I just had it, Wallet 20 work file if you're interested. A reminder about the social that's coming up at 5:30. It's Wall, but you have to spell it differently. WALL.
Was it one L, I think, two T's.
WALLET.
And then it's 20, not spelled out 20. So 20. Yeah.
Okay.
And then work file.
So that kind of the point too is Josh is here. He'll be socializing. Josh is committing you to socialize tonight. So be there and be social. Ben's there. Mark will be there. Craig will be there. If you guys have questions, want to talk more about what was presented here, love to, you know, have personal conversations online. That's or offline, but individually. That's kind of what this socialization event is for. So again, a big thank you to everybody for participating. Thank you for you all sticking this out. We'll conclude. Hope to see many of you at the social at 5:30, and from there, maybe one last round of applause for those that have been like. Thank you all. I'll come give it to you. I'll spell it right this time. Oh, I get that. What's that?
There's one with NAR.
So the algorithm starts to see that you're like that. Yeah, so no, just those are really, it's like saying data refresh. Find interesting stuff. So that's. Yeah. Those are kind of really like novel phrases. I've got. Oh, right. Even like. Rocket load is like the biggest. Some of those. And everything actually.
Good.
All right.
You just gotta look down, I got a second.
Worked out well. Good to see you. Starting first thing this morning. I said, tell me the other big grade, I'm still laid out that.
Florida's one of the few places where there's been housing together. I felt.
Yeah, bus is here anytime.
You know, it's, I don't, I really can't especially close to I'll just say, I was one group or something bad, but I kind of think something. Yeah, we want not tragedy, but like just, you know. Yeah. Yeah. Forbearance. There's no appetite to close on people, and that's a kindness, right? There should be kindness.
Yeah, he's right. That's all.
But I feel. It's gonna be harsh and for a short period of time, I think interest rates. There is, you have to get kids up and totally, it's, their family got their very good kids, look at the house, you know. I think or whatever it is. Well, I.